one of the fundamental things I've learned in hospitality is perfection to service. It's just all the time, zero tolerance to error. The growth in the residential market, fundamentally this time, has been on premium and the luxury housing.
Yes, yes.
And
And no wonder you have so many brands now having Indians as brand ambassadors. I'm talking about the film stars or the cricketers. I came across this very nice line, which generally relates to investment. Bhav and bhav. Bhav being your emotion and bhav being the value, right? When either of them are out of control, there are Bhagwan ke bharose ho.
the IT industry was really what created the office boom over many years.
Absolutely.
Right? That slowed down and coincidentally got picked up immediately by the GCC and the
India-facing
business. If the IT business comes to fore again, which it
man.
hopefully will, I think it will be
Huge.
heavy.
For every 1,000 square feet of new office demand generates a residential demand for 6 on 10. So, and I think that is the CRE ripple effect also, that as a full circle.
Hello, welcome to the first episode of this podcast, Frankly Speaking with Viral. I'm very happy to introduce my first guest, Shishir Baijal, Chairman Managing Director, Knight Frank India. Shishir, welcome to the first podcast of this series. I'm very, very happy to have you as our first guest here. And today we are going to have a freewheeling conversation about life, about Shishir's journey, a successful career, of course, a lot to learn from the real estate situation in the country, and some bits from him on what he sees where India is moving. On that note, Shishir, let me first begin with asking you, you had a very, very successful journey thus far, but we all know that you started in the hospitality sector. And what made you make the switch to real estate and how this happened?
Well, thank you, Veer. Thank you for inviting me for this for the podcast and being your first guest. Well, yes, it has been a long journey. Well, it has been actually to the date 45 years since I first started my work life in ITC in 1979. I think it was mid-May sometime. So it's been a journey, and as I look back at it, I think it's seen a fair amount of, I would say, trials and tribulations, and I think overall it's been a great journey thus far. I did start my career in hospitality with ITC in 1979, and after close to 20 years with ITC, I decided to move on from hospitality to other sectors. In 2001, I started Inox Leisure, which is today, along with PVR Inox, the largest multiplex player in the country and the fifth largest in the world. And after that, I also moved and dabbled into the fund business with the real estate retail fund with Kshitij and Everstone, with Kshitij, which is now christened as Everstone Capital, and in 2012 with Knight Frank. So it has been 45 years in various industries: hospitality, entertainment, real estate fund, and pure real estate.
Oh, phenomenal. I mean, it's heartening to know that there have been various firsts through what you have done. But I wanted to understand that what made you actually quit at that time, the hotel industry, and what you were doing at that time as a GM of some large assets, and the glamour which comes with the hotel industry, to make that switch. I'm assuming you would be in your 30s at that time. To make that switch, how did it happen?
Well, you're calculating my age, Wes. But yes, it was in my late 30s, early 40s. And I think there's always a pivotal time in life. And I think it was the 93 bomb blasts, really, which was the core effect, started the effect of that change. And one of the hotels that I was looking after was perhaps also was in the bomb blast. And there was a time at that stage we decided, what do we do and how do we continue and with life and stuff. And I decided that perhaps the most important decision I made in life at that stage was that I needed to go get back into education. So 20 years after I left college and started working with ITC, I went to Australia to do my MBA.
Wow.
And spent a year and a half there at the Bond University at the Gold Coast, where I did my MBA, and then came back to India.
You chose quite a place.
Well, it was a lovely place, and more ways than one. But it was great education, and I must say, I enjoyed every minute of it. Going back and doing your master's in business after 20 years of work experience brings a whole lot of different context into the whole business of education and studying. You could relate with a lot of things rather than pure theoretical constructs into actual work life. And a lot of that learning over what happened in 1996, 97, in those 2 years, have stood me in great stead subsequently.
I must say that, of course, having learned from you over the years and also found that you had done this stint, I can say that in a lot of ways, I'm also trying to do this. I'm trying to do my sort of advanced management program very, very soon. And In the past, when I picked up a general management program from India, I think you're absolutely right. It just takes you back to a lot of things that you may have done and then reinforces the theory, which really eggs you on for the next 5-10 years and the upskilling that happens with it.
I couldn't agree more. In fact, if I look back at my life and my investments that I've made, perhaps the most important investment, and perhaps the one that has really paid off, has been the investment in my own self and investment in reskilling myself at that time. And it wasn't those days when you did organization that you sort of funded yourself, and I think that was the investment in time and money well spent.
Right, and I think this upskilling part, which is a huge factor in everything that we do, it also allows you to pause and reflect back on where you are with respect to your career. I think the biggest advice that I got from someone when I'm 45 now is that at 40 you had more time in your career to go, and you would perhaps have to achieve far more than what you did in the last 20 years. So, and you are a big example and an inspiration. Having said that, to delve a little more on this whole journey from hospitality, I think back in the days would have been there were only few hotels. So I think access to people and hence relationships in various spectrums of life, and also what goes in. I'm sure there's a lot that help you and you learned from that. To the first, with respect to, of course, then picking up your education, and then the first real estate fund in the country. So there's the first multiplex chain, the first real estate fund, and then of course the IPC. What are some of the big things that you have sort of picked up in the various stages?
I think way back in the 70s, hospitality was one of the first few industries in India which were truly global.
Right.
I think, in terms of one of the fundamental things I've learned in hospitality is perfection to service. It's just all the time there's this zero tolerance to error. And I think that's what brought Indian hospitality to where it is. Whether it was the three major chains in the country, which was then two and exists today, it was fundamental the focus on detail, the focus on perfection, and the fundamental focus on the client. And I think that discipline and that part of it, will stand you in regardless of any industry that you are in. So the hospitality played a huge role in my life. Whether it is to lead from the front, to do things yourself. It teaches you all parts of business, whether it is client service, it is focus on profitability, focus on performance, focus on your team. It's all about people. The industry is all about people. And that learning, when you take over to any other industry, can really help out. Case in point, just to correct, ours was not the first multiplex. PVR was the first multiplex. Inox came later than that. But we lifted the standards at that stage of what the average cinema goer was. Traditionally, till then, people went to a cinema to watch a movie, and you had seats and you just watched a movie on a big screen. What the entire multiplex experience did was to enhance the experience to a different level.
Wow.
I mean, why should toilets in a theater have to stink all the time? Why can't toilets in a theater be like a 5-star hotel? Why can't the cuisine that be served inside be similar to what is served in a restaurant or hotel? Why can't the experience be more luxurious? And it was challenging those paradigms that were there with the earlier cinemas, which really was focused around the cinema experience of a customer, which enhanced what is today's multiplex experience. And the same goes for in the other. So as long as, and that's the way I've seen my life and my career in the changing industries, that it does not matter as long as you're focusing everything around the client or the customer, and you understand that, and you always have the ability to hire the right people, and that's how you do it. I mean, today I'm sure you know much more about real estate than I do, and similarly, when you go to industry, you should not be shy of hiring talent which is perhaps has no more knowledge than you, and talent is better than you, but as long as you understand what is the basic premise of the business, that's what a good leadership is all about.
No, I'm glad that this is getting recorded. You're saying that I have more knowledge. That's on a lighter note. But if you look at the whole change, I think you've been part of that change to the cinema experience, right? From where it was, back in my times, Gaiety Galaxy, Gemini, was the go-to place, for example, and so many such theaters, to this multi-screen experience and how you brought the element of hospitality from your background those days, and then how business evolved. Any moment where you thought that, that where you felt that this was something just phenomenal that was happening? And I'm sure, again, there is this whole element of, the getting the movies, and there's a glamour element to it as well. But anything that you recollect of those days?
I think it was spectacular. There was a lot of adrenaline moving. It was path-breaking trends that were coming in. I think it was from both the demand side as well as the supply side. Producers, distributors, and all were getting a new medium to show films, and it really changed the entire way the films were being consumed within the market. As things have started changing today, it's back to a really 360 degrees where OTTs and all have come in, and they are changing the platform. And that was at that point of time when things were changing, and it was, really, really heady days, and everybody was flocking to the theaters. Shopping centers had just started coming in.
Wow.
In fact, the first shopping center that really came in, Crossroad, did not have a theater at that stage. So we got into making the complexes in which to house a theater with a small shopping center. So the ones that we created perhaps in Pune and in Baroda were actual centers there that would have a house, would have a theater and small retail. Of course, that coincided with the entire shopping center revolution in this country, and organized retail came in, and that was my next move. To bring about environments in which you can not only watch movies, but you can also spend your time and shop in a far better environment than the earlier erstwhile high streets, which weren't as good as they were today.
So it's just quite like someone writing a story to perfection. It's like writing a script to say that First Hotels, which was so much in vogue at that time, and there were only a few, and you were leading one of the biggest chains, and then moving on to the multiplex experience in the country, which is much like the OTT, which you explained now, and then into organized retail. So it's like what people would have done or thought of, you were actually part of that journey. Just phenomenal. So this was at Kshitij, right?
This was at Kshitij, where we got the first retail real estate fund, and we started creating shopping centers as well as investing with people who were creating shopping centers. And that, as I said, was a phenomenal beginning in the country where we really got into organized retail.
Right.
And at that point of time, that also coincided with foreign private equity players entering or being allowed to invest in retail real estate. And with that, of course, things, and you can see that whole retail boom that is there.
Absolutely.
And it has changed the way, for us, always, the belief was always there that a retail shopping center is an essential part of everybody's social being.
Yeah.
That, you earlier days used to go to a retail or a high street to shop. Shopping is much more than just going and buying a shirt. Is the entire experience of shopping. And that is where that whole experience came in, that you create an environment in which people just come there and enjoy themselves while at the shopping centers. And then the beauty is to how do you convert that footfall into sale?
Wow.
Or to pull the people up 3 levels into a theater.
And this fund then also moved into other segments of real estate?
It did. So
can I say that this was also one of the foremost earlier real estate funds in country at that time?
There were other real estate funds in residential and all earlier, but this was the first retail-led real estate fund. Then, of course, the other fund was the international retail-led fund, which was into mixed-use developments. And then, of course, there was the third first, was when we got the first warehouse-based fund, which is today, of course, Indospace, with the largest warehouse organization in the country.
Right. So, would you also say that you were a little 5 years early with all these things in terms of, from a business standpoint, because what you had envisioned or what these firms had envisioned were a little 5 years early, given that, India is a lot about getting your regulatory framework. But of course, it's been an experience, it's a journey. But, in the hindsight, how did you see? And I'm sure there have been one of those stories where, you felt, maybe you would have stuck on, it would have been a different thing.
The timings were right. You're absolutely right. The timings are right. But I think what has happened since then is that the supply side reforms that have taken place today, had those reforms been then there, at that stage it would have been much simpler for everyone. The exits with the REITs were not there, which have been there now for the last, I would say, 4 to 5 years. So I think a lot has evolved, but you needed to have someone to start. And then only these things evolve. So I have no regrets to that part of it. And I think the country was ready for it. I think the consumers were ready for it. And I think this is a natural process of evolution from where it started perhaps 20 years ago to where it is today. I think we are just at the tip of the iceberg. It's a very, very nascent industries, whether it be, I think whether it be commercial real estate or quality retail or any of these. I think we've just started it. That also coincided with the amount of emphasis that the country has put on infrastructure. I think all of these things really coincide with, with infrastructure coming in, with the supply side reforms coming, as well as, the Indian society itself becoming more aspirational in its own outlook, and, lead you to using quality products and paying for quality products and finding value for it.
Right.
And that's how these...
I think it's the whole ecosystem coming together.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, with the various firsts and, whether it's the cinema chain or it's the real estate fund, and then, of course, heading Knight Frank over the last 12 years, let me ask you and delve into your sort of, core now area of expertise with respect to real estate. There's a lot happening over the last 5 years. We've come through COVID. Where do you see real estate in India at large, where we are today, and where do you see it moving? And what are the drivers that you see are going to make this happen?
It's a broad question, so I'm going to give a long-winded answer.
Yeah,
I don't mind.
Yeah.
I think the key is that after many years, in fact, after 2014, right up to the onset of the pandemic in 2020, we saw a downturn in the residential market for many reasons.
Stagnation.
I would say stagnation would be a very polite word. I think it was really moving southwards across all the 8 major markets that we saw. Simultaneously, at the same time, commercial real estate offices were perhaps scaling new heights every year. And warehousing sector was also booming. But the majority of Indian real estate was always focused on residential.
I think 85% or 88% of everything.
So, whilst there was the corporates or the commercial real estate did well, the majority of the developers or the people who were there in the residential real estate were really getting a drubbing. It is the post-pandemic time or during the pandemic time that the buyer's perception towards owning a property changed dramatically. I think the pandemic was perhaps once in a lifetime change that happens, which changes things. And people's desire to own a property for safety, security, a larger home for perhaps working from home or from schooling from home, and all those aspects turned around. And we saw a change taking place in residential purchase starting from the third quarter of 2020, which has continued till date. This is for the first time that really all sectors of hospitality, all sectors of real estate have simultaneously picking up. So
led by
real
residential
estate was doing well, but it had a bit of a slowdown during the pandemic.
Yeah.
But that was buoyed by the upturn in residential. The need for warehousing was never higher during the pandemic than with the e-commerce and all coming in. So warehousing picked up, residential picked up, and as people got back to work, office leasing picked up.
Right.
With the economy picking up, and with all the geopolitical issues and the supply constraints that are taking place, the amount of emphasis on manufacturing that has come in. So with manufacturing, construction activity, and services picking up, at this point of time, there is no reason to feel that this is just a temporary growth phase, but one feel that it is part of a large, longer-term, sustained bull phase that we have in
Absolutely. In fact, if we look at the momentum that has been built in the residential sector, I think it allowed a lot of local developers to shore up their revenues, balance sheet, etc. And after all the structural changes that the business or the real estate business went through with RERA, etc., the NPA problems, etc., which was also happening to corporate India simultaneously, I think this turnaround, there was a period where Indian developers wanted to hold on to commercial real estate, and you had some of the larger international funds looking at some form of an exit. But what is happening, and this is specific to commercial real estate, is that it is now turning back because the demand for commercial real estate in India is really sustainable, as you are mentioning, that it is, bouncing on several wheels. One is the whole supply chain, the manufacturing push, the technology piece, and then the India-facing business doing the way it is. And I think we can feel it in a more pronounced way. And now you see buying of core assets also coming through. We just heard of a large acquisition which is happening in Bombay, where one of the large international funds is looking to buy a large asset. Gives you a sign that that side of the cycle is also coming back or into buying. So your view, I just wanted to understand, residential sector continues to be domestically funded on the equity side. On the debt, of course, there is still international play. When do you think that there will be equity play coming in through, and there's some very, very good marquee names in there, when and why would, international players come into the residential sector in a big way?
I think the international sectors funds will also come in residential once the living sectors itself starts taking over. I think there are many more nuances, the rental yield market to pick up and other parts of the market to come. I think it's the student housing, senior living, and a whole lot of living sector spaces that are really today crying out to be fed. And I think it's a matter of time that international funds will come in. Just to put a little bit more flavor to that point, one of the other changes that took place in residential was that most people think that India is an affordable market, and the luxury and the medium or the premium and the luxury continue to stagnate. Actually, it was the other way around. The growth in the residential market fundamentally this time has been on the premium and the luxury housing.
Yes.
And that is the core part of the major change that has happened. And I think that is where, and you'll see that even if you put a corollary of that on corporate real estate,
the move towards quality.
the move towards things. And you'll see that across, whether it be passenger vehicles or you see
Any
everywhere,
segment, yeah.
that it is the premium and the luxury which is growing well as people are becoming aspirational. They understand quality, and the number of households that are going higher and their aspirational levels continue to rise. That move is remaining
General
constant.
premiumization in every aspect of life in terms of buying. And no wonder you have so many brands now having Indians as brand ambassadors. I'm talking about the film stars or the cricketers. They are endorsing some large, very luxury brands. Absolutely. I also wanted to get a sense from you on this run for residential sector. How long do you think?
I think the runway to growth still is there. I think there is, whilst there is a lot of talk happening, whether are we reaching this again an overbuilt situation? Are we getting into a bubble? Because for the last couple of quarters, the supply has outstripped the sales. But our view on that, or my view on that, is that I think it's too early. And we have a look at the velocity of sales and the quarters to sell in a residential project. And both seem to be well in control. I think the affordability index also has, though, increased a little bit because of the interest rates are high, but it is still far better than what it was 7-8 years ago. And so I think the affordability index is just right. The demand factors are right. The velocity of sales are good. The quarters to sell are less. Fundamentally, all at this point of time point out that this could be for at least the next few years. I don't think there's much to worry about.
What are those signs that one should be careful of? Is this a run on speculation or end use?
This is end use for the moment. And that you will get to know very soon. I mean, if the rentals start falling, right? If the velocity of sales fall, if the unsold inventory starts picking up, there are a number of varieties of parameters that are available for us to start putting out alarm bells when that happens.
I'll take the liberty of sharing. I was traveling, and I won't, go into the specifics of it. That if you look at the last turn and why regulation came into residential is to protect consumer interest. I think one other part is when brokers get to paid high fees, right? And there's so much of frenzy. You hear about these sales on day zero. Of course, there's regulation now, and that frenzy that I will book this and I will book that, and then there will be an upside, and I will flip, right? Is that starting to happen in some markets?
The number of factors one can look at. I think in today's times, we analyze so many facets of the sales that you can easily find out if there is some issue. Whether there is too much of unsold inventory that picks up, while the supply keeps going up, even if the velocity of sales start coming down, if there are perhaps unsolicited purchase happening or brokers being paid perhaps much larger amounts than they should be, you can make out there is speculation happening in the offing. There are a number of signs that will come in. All of us have been through that phase in the 2006 or 7s right up to 2012. And I think the whole reason why RERA came in was to prevent such activities.
Absolutely.
And demonetization came in to prevent such type of speculation. So I think there are enough signs to indicate when that happens. I just feel today that we are seeing part of a frenzy towards purchase after close to 7 years of downturn that has happened. And on the other side, I also see developers who are also bringing a whole lot of supply to the forefront. Sometimes there being a mismatch. But prime developers in good spots still today have virtually zero inventory left.
Absolutely.
So I think that one will have to be careful of where the overbuild supply is coming in and at what stage we need to put alarm bells.
I think
the alarm bells.
That word, that frenzy, whether it's in the overall ecosystem, whether it's the developer, whether it's the broker or the consumer or the buyer of real estate, I think when that frenzy starts and people research more to buy a mobile phone than to buy a house, I think is when you realize things are sort of going south. Hopefully we are far away from that and there's enough regulation in place. But I think a sign is that
No, I think we need to be careful because the stakes are high this time.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the amount of redevelopment that's happening in Mumbai, virtually, I was reading somewhere the other day, they said in every fourth or fifth home in fourth or fifth building in South Mumbai is going for redevelopment. Every third or fourth home in Bandra, Pali Hill is going for redevelopment. And all of these are north of 100,000 rupees a square foot. So in terms of pure value,
absolutely,
the stakes are really high. So one needs to be really careful.
Even in NCR, I mean, it's just heartening to know the things that are happening. But I'm sure there's enough and more regulation in place. I came across this very nice line, which generally relates to investment, bhav and bhav. Bhav being your emotion and bhav being the value, right? When either of them are out of control,
True. Wait. Keep it in check.
There are Bhagwan ke bharose ho. So you got to keep that in check. Let me ask you, we've been to US and we've traveled and, met a lot of clients in the US in the last sort of 18 months. And there is a huge element of commercial real estate which comes from outside of India, Europe and North America. What do you see? How it is shaping? So one is this whole hybrid work from home environment, which is there in play. The other part is, what is the sense of business that you're getting from your interactions with clients and how they're looking at India and how would it impact commercial real estate?
Two parts to the question. Really, what I feel the Western world, US in specific, how they're going to do and how we'll be able to export our services to them, or perhaps they'll be able to outsource some roles to us, as well as how, in the second part of the question that you asked me, is how Indian business for corporate, for the office market will be. I think India has sustained itself. Today, India with I think surprised all of us with a Q4 GDP growth of, close to 8.6 or something, ending the year perhaps at 7.4% this year and expected to grow at 6.7 or whatever, 6.7, 6.8% for the next 2 years. Is by far the fastest growing large economy in the world. Most of this is being fueled by domestic demand, consumption demand, which is there. And I think that's the important factor, that during the times when the rest of the economies in the world were struggling or having low growth rates, if not into recession, India continued to grow at a scorching pace of close to 8.5% in the quarter, or 7.5% for the year. And the demand for this obviously resulted in a higher office demand, office leasing. I mean, last year's numbers that we closed in 2023 December was nearly touching, in gross terms, 61 odd million square feet of space, which we had done in our highest peak in 2019.
Yes.
Right. So how did this come about? On the other side, we were saying that when we went to the US, we saw that it was fairly quiet there. But how do you explain a 61 million odd square feet of gross absorption in India if that demand was low? So it was fundamentally fueled by the India-facing business, the thrust to manufacturing that came in, and we said that manufacturing is growing in double digits over the last year or so. That business which came from manufacturing, the GCCs that came into India, the whole global capability centers, and the India-facing business fueled the sector and took care of the slack that happened with the reduction in the ITS demand, which was a resultant of a slowing Western economy. My small point in this is, that as 2024 moves on and the global election uncertainties reduce, as well as perhaps as is expected, central banks around the world reduce the rates in the latter part of 2024,
Right.
the economies will pick up.
Right.
And once the economies will pick up, perhaps more private investment into India will pick up, and our export of services from India to those Western economies will perhaps start rising again as those economies do well. And fundamentally, when I'm talking about exports and export of services, I'm talking about the IT business that will come.
So you're basically saying that the India-facing business continues to thrive. GCCs are anyways sort of captives, and those businesses still smaller in number. I think not more than 2,500 put together, all GCCs in the country. They have been growing, so they have the confidence of setting up their own base in India. And from a larger standpoint, if the IT services firm come to party, then you have a far stronger growth in the commercial real estate space. And then you have manufacturing, you have the geopolitics, you have the supply chain, realignment that's happening. So it's
a heady mix.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
The elections behind us.
The election behind the IT industry was really what created the office boom over many years.
Absolutely.
Right? That slowed down and coincidentally got picked up immediately by the GCC and the
India-facing
business. If the IT business comes to fore again, which it hopefully will, once the Western economies start picking up, once the rates start reducing, and once their government uncertainties of election goes away, I think it will be heavy. It will be huge.
Yeah, I mean, they've been the flag bearers of volume growth over the last 25, 30 years.
The last point I want to just say is that the GCCs are just the beginning. As long as India remains a major economy, perhaps in the next few years going to be the third largest economy in the world, and with a talent pool that is the envy of the world, there's no reason why GCCs won't want to come to India, not only to serve the Indian market, but also to be a trendsetter or to path-breaking robotics or path-breaking technological breakthroughs for the rest of the world.
I know. I remember we having this conversation that it's a full circle. They first came and set up call centers. Then they went up with IT services firms. Then they went up in the value chain and they did some form of technology, high-end technology. Then they did captives. Then they realized that India is a market to have your own India-facing business. And then now I can do manufacturing.
Absolutely.
So it's a full circle of CRE, and you have demand which sort of caters to every segment, touches every segment, and you have employment generation. And I was reading somewhere that 1,000 square feet of new office demand, not gross. Well, let's say I'm 10,000 square feet and I took 15, so net of 5,000. For every 1,000 square feet of new office demand, which means 100 square feet per person, so 10 new jobs per 1,000. So 50 jobs for 5,000 square feet generates a residential demand for 6 on 10. So 30 new houses for 50 new employees. I mean, as an aspirational country, young, who then buy cars, etc., etc. So, and I think that is the CRE
Ripple effect.
Ripple effect also, that as a full circle that is happening. So in terms of the scale and value, we all know that India continues to be extremely value driven. It's funny that in Nariman Point, Express Towers, maybe at 45,000 rupees a foot, thereabouts value on the yield today and the rent, versus NCPA, 100,000 rupees a foot, less than 100 meters away, right? So commercial real estate is extremely valued, and it comes at a superb discount, and hence all the funds owning it. Where do you see it going from now, given that we are close to 1 billion square feet of stock in the country?
I think it is a long way to go. I think it's a really, really long way to go. I mean, you gave the number of 1 billion square feet that commercial real estate has, not in Mumbai, but in India.
India.
Right? And if, as we were discussing earlier, I mean, what does Manhattan have? Close to 450 million in Manhattan itself.
Yes.
Which is half of Indian real estate.
Yeah.
In a fraction of the area.
And 1/7 or 1/8,
Of
average rent of
value.
85 and Indian rupee average rent of about $450.
Absolutely.
Per square foot per month. So, it's a volume value.
So volume, value, number of people, space required, quality, etc. I think it's a huge runway to growth that we have in commercial real estate. I think what will also happen is over the last few years, the amount of focus on infrastructure that has been given by the central and state governments is going to make commercial real estate far more accessible in various locations, rather than just being in one CBD, or then the other one would be in the middle of the boondocks, which didn't have the right social infrastructure or the transport infrastructure. Today, with all amount of money being spent on on roads, on metros, on monorails, on ports, on airports, and everything else, accessibility to your office space is becoming far easier. And I feel that there will be a huge amount of supply that will soon open up in many areas, which will be not too far from your workplace or not too far from your living spaces, which will make those workplaces great too.
So, I'm going to veer this conversation about Knight Frank and your journey at Knight Frank. But from a sheer number standpoint, if you look at the opportunity in the project management space, the facility management space, the advisory, and then transactions, and then, if I just look at the office segment, at a weighted average rent of, let's say, 85 rupees in the country at 2-month brokerage and 60 million square feet of absorption, if my math serves me right, we are talking about, about a 800 crore to 1,000 crore brokerage market today. And what I hear from you is that volume growth and the per square foot rental growth, I think is just staggering numbers that we are talking about. So from that standpoint, just want to understand from you, where do you see Knight Frank, and, how do you see, as we are, while this is a conversation on the market, but, I take the liberty to understand and ask you your view of where does Knight Frank stand?
I think our focus was quite clearly initially from the beginning was on corporate real estate. And our businesses fundamentally focus around our clients locally and building our relationships locally. And throughout our journey, at least out of the 30 odd years that Knight Frank's been in India, I've been here in it for 12 odd years. And I can safely say for the last time that I've been here, our focus has been on perform, and perfect. And to keep the focus of our basis on the client satisfaction and build relationship with our customers. And I think that's going to be the continued focus, to make sure that we have the right advice for them. We become not only just transaction brokers, but give the right advice to them and become the advisor of choice, as I would say, backed by serious research, to help them make the right decisions for real estate. And I think that will continue. The relationship with them is a 360 degrees, from advisory research to transactions, as well as project management and facilities management and capital markets, therein to buy or to sell across all segments, whether it be offices, whether it be leasing of industrial warehousing spaces, or be hospitality, or be retail, or would be buying and selling of ready assets, or something that we perhaps specialize in and best known for is the land, buying and purchasing of land. The other trend that we spotted around about a decade ago, and we've really moved on, and I think will continue to grow, will be infrastructure.
Yes.
And that, I think, is a spot that we really enjoy. And I think that has a huge amount of value that we as IPCs bring to it in helping and assisting central, state, private companies who are in infrastructure to see how best we can assist them in their real estate, in the real estate domain, whether it be on the highway amenities or new highways, new roads, new ports, new cities coming up, and where we can do that. My personal take is that I think the evolution of real estate is very, very nascent in this country, and we've got a long way to go to adulthood and then to maturity. So it's a long way there.
Yeah. So, you said, if I hear, perform, perfection, right? And so this is from a client standpoint, right. What is our promise to clients?
And from our team standpoint.
So people.
And it's all about people. So the whole journey, has been to create a strong, stable leadership team. And I think, I don't want to cast, but that leadership team has been there since what I inherited, and has been there since stable 15 odd years. And we continue to grow the team under. And it is the fact that you can recruit the best and to attract them, and then for them to remain motivated and to retain them is perhaps the greatest, not only challenge, but I think that's been our success. And that's something that I like to just continue on, to make sure that we become the magnets for the best talent in the country to come and work for.
Shishir, you've also now you're part of the global exec board. And, it's the first, again, in the many firsts that you've had, that, you have from the India chairman, managing director, part of the global exec board. What is the vision of Knight Frank Global for India, or in your responsibility? You're looking at not just India, but, you have a advisory role to talk about what's happening with the Knight Frank world.
I think it was a great opportunity, and I was really humbled by it. The fact that for the first time they got somebody outside the UK and to join the global board. I think Knight Frank has a fairly unique positioning, and the fact that it is the largest privately held property management company, the fact that it is a zero debt internationally, gives us
Cash reserves.
not only the cash reserves, gives us an opportunity to be strategic in outlook.
Absolutely.
So
Not answerable to shareholders.
or doing short-term decisions for whatever reasons. So when we started investing, say investing in India, there was a long-term view on it. The platform that I was given, I wasn't expected that I need to make immediate returns. I could take long decisions for the long term, and those things stand us in great stead.
Right.
The spirit of partnership is prevalent right through the chain.
Right.
Today, I think anyone can get in touch with these, the senior partner or group chair, and I'm sure the response will come within hours.
Yes.
You can get in touch with anyone, and that is the flatness of the organization. It's big enough to be an international firm, yet small enough to be cohesive and to have the collaborative spirit. And that is a Knight Frank. That's this really gives me great joy to work with. That the spirit of partnership, the cohesiveness, the level of collaboration that we have with everyone, and where the word partner is just not an English word, but is actually felt in its.
Absolutely.
You feel it, you live it,
Yeah.
and that's the vision that we have, and that's what I do on the board. I take all the experiences that I have and give them the experience from perhaps one of the larger emerging markets into the boardroom, and to make perhaps a decision that could be more international.
And also very
beneficial
forward looking. I'm not sure, but how many firms in a similar trade would have someone from India on their global board? I'm not sure, but it is certainly forward looking and speaks volumes of what the firm feels about India and how they look at India as well. So that's great. We've had a great chat, and I would just say that first of all, thank you very much for sharing your insights and your experience. It's quite inspirational. Your views on the overall real estate market, your views on the economy, and how do you see your stint at Knight Frank, and how you are looking at it, and what's transpired over the last sort of 12 years. Any parting notes from your side?
No, I think it's to me, regardless of the last few years, I think India has a great future. So I think it's up to all of us to see our best to meet this need and demand, and to continue to grow with it. And thank you for having me here. And
Thank you, Shishir. And on that note, this is the first episode of our podcast, Frankly Speaking with Viral. Thank you.